Is it time to dismantle some doctrines? If you don't know what that means, then come along with me. I'm Dr. Clint Haycock, a former evangelical Bible college teacher and pastor of more than 20 years. Join me as we deconstruct whatever dogmas and beliefs have held you behind, and together work to reconstruct and rebuild your authentic self.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Dismantling Doctrine Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Dr. Clint Haycock. I'm just going to get this introduction out of the way because I've got a chat coming up in a few minutes with Tim Mills, the Harmonic Atheist, and it's so good, I'm just going to let it run. I don't want to break it up into two halves. So we cover a lot of ground in this episode. I've been listening to it as I've been editing it, and I've been struck again how good this is. This is going to be a very helpful discussion, especially for those of us who came out of Christianity, whether it was a controlling fundamentalist version or maybe a slightly milder version. I suppose we have to admit there are some iterations of Christianity that are less damaging than others, but on some levels, a lot of it is quite damaging. Those of us that suffered from things like religious trauma syndrome, rapture anxiety, depression, all sorts of other things as a result of this religion that purports to offer us so much. And yet when you actually break it down and look into it, it offers so little. And in fact, it does a lot of damage. And this is something that Tim and I get into, and we're going to conclude this episode by talking about resources, things you can do to recover your authentic self off the back of leaving Christianity or whatever controlling religion or cult sort of environment you came out of. The parallels are there. They're all too obvious to see if you really want to start looking at them between so much of evangelicalism and the world of the cults. It's something I talk about quite a bit. And of course, speaking of cult psychology and recovering from religion, I'm reminded of my book, Not So Shiny, Not So Happy People, How Bill Gothard Church and Family Taught Me Christianity Doesn't Work. If you have not picked up a copy of this book yet, you can find it on Amazon. This is something I get into. This is my backstory coming out of controlling fundamentalist religion, the Bill Gothard cult. And I've been saying this for months and months and months now, but I finally stopped procrastinating. The good news is I am actually now doing the recording, the audible version of the book. I'm about nearly 80% of the way through. I've been chipping away at it, doing about 2 or 3 or 4 chapters a night as I get time. So that is hopefully coming out sometime this summer. That's my hope, that my narrated version of the book will be coming out soon. So I will keep you posted of that. In the meantime, you can pick up a paperback version, a Kindle version, or if you want to do the audible version, there is an AI narrated virtual voice version that's actually pretty good. But I hope that my version, I think, will be a lot better. It's actually been quite a good experience, I think, going through it, because I can put the emphasis on the certain things the way I wrote it, and that's what I wish the AI version would do. So this is my chance to correct it and hopefully make it better. Now, what's coming up here in the next few episodes on the Dismantling Doctrine podcast? We've got a couple of shows lined up already. I've already done these recordings. I chatted the other day with Matthew Bodie. He has written a book about the Seven Mountains Mandate. This is something I've talked about a lot, Dominion theology. Now, Matthew is actually a Christian, but he's sounding the alarm bells, especially now in the era of Trump and what's going on with things like Project 2025, the America First Policy Institute, and all that. So that's coming up after the episode with Tim Mills. And then I had a chat the other day with Lena Sabula. She's actually from Ukraine/Russia. There's a really interesting backstory there. She now lives in Canada, and we're doing a crossover episode. So we had a really good conversation. So look for that one coming out with Lena Sabula. Now, before we get into the episode with Tim Mills, I wanted to say really quickly that we recorded this months and months ago. Now, this was actually right after the presidential election. We knew that Donald Trump had won, but of course, when Tim and I did this recording, we were not aware of the full implications of what was going to happen in the Trump era. So you'll probably catch a couple of references that might be a little bit out of date now, but the same principle applies. I'm very concerned about what Trump is doing, and I'm concerned about what's happening with things like Project 2025, the America First Policy Institute, now that we're actually seeing these things becoming instituted in Trump's new administration. And in fact, this is something I've been in talks with Chris Shelton of the Speaking of Cults podcast. We are going to do something on the America First Policy Institute and how that's being implemented in the Trump administration, probably on his show and I think on my show as well. So look for that coming up too. All right, let's get on into the chat with Tim Mills, the Harmonic Atheist, looking at this issue of helping people to escape from Christianity. I'm really happy to be reconnecting with Tim Mills, the Harmonic Atheist. So thank you, Tim. Welcome to the Dismantling Doctrine podcast.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
It was really good. We were on your show not long ago. That episode came out, early December, I think it was, talking about my book, Not So Shiny, Not So Happy People. What a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed being on your show. So thank you for having me on the Harmonic Atheist.
Yeah, my pleasure. My honor. I was blessed and highly favored.
Yeah, let's quote some Bible verses and throw them in there. Well, now I'm interested. Why do you call yourself the Harmonic Atheist? I mean, we're going to get in your backstory, but just out of curiosity, where does that title come from?
Sure. It's actually interesting. A lot of people mistake it and think I'm trying to create harmony, and I'm
Hmm.
absolutely, definitely not trying to
Right.
create harmony. I'm very much on the other side of that fence. But years ago, I worked for a brokerage firm, and so I was a licensed stockbroker for several years. And most of that time, I ended up focusing more on I was in the fraud department as opposed to helping people with their accounts and so forth. But I did learn enough to know about some of the things that people would call in and ask about in charting and trading kind of things. And one of the things I learned is that there's something called harmonic trading. Have you heard of that at all?
No.
You know the Fibonacci ratio? You know what that is?
I've heard of that, but I'm not sure what it exactly is. So explain it for us.
Well, it's really kind of strange to be honest. There there is a ratio that was discovered back in the 1600s by this Italian Fibonacci. And long story short, the ratio of one number in this sequence of numbers, one to the next one, is 1.618. So you just take any number, times it by 1.618, and you get the next number. Well, you discovered that that's the ratio through that's just woven throughout the universe. It's as if, if there were a God, it's as if he designed that number. It's the
Mm,
ratio at which a universe expands. You see it with tree rings. You see it with the reproduction of rabbits. You see it even with your fingers. I've been told that if you were to take that ratio of that part of your finger as opposed to the whole finger, it's 1 to 1.618. So it's woven into the universe all over. When you see a seashell expand, it opens up at that ratio, the Nautilus. And for some strange reason, markets honor that Fibonacci ratio. And what they do is often you'll find that there's a what's called a measured move, where if you were to look at a chart, you'd see that the chart goes from one point to the top, and then drops down, then it goes again. And if you're to measure the first and the third legs, they're the same length on the chart. They
hmm.
are in harmony.
There's that
And so
1.618 again.
either 1.618 or variation thereof. And anyway, long story short, I thought it was really cool. It's something I would love to understand more someday, but it captured my attention because I was always trying to listen to people asking questions about it. And so I thought that's a pretty cool idea. I like the idea of harmonics. It also, I would say, though, on a more personal level, maybe I would have chosen the word for this other reason. One of the interesting things to me is that I've studied a little bit of the Pythagorean cult, which was a major influence on the New Testament and on the Essene cult and so forth. And they deal with harmonics in terms of numbers as well as musical harmonics a lot. And it's possible that there's some interesting, kind of very stealthy, esoteric Gnostic harmonics that are woven into the New Testament. It's one of my main goals is to try to find them if they're there.
Mm.
But it's at least something that was on their minds. The people that influenced the Essenes, who influenced the Dead Sea Scrolls in the New Testament, they were focused heavily on harmonics, especially in music and advanced numbers and numerology. So it's a pretty interesting word for me. It probably means more on the Pythagorean side these days.
Right. Yeah. So how does that relate to you being an atheist, though? Because I mean, that's an interesting concept. It's woven throughout, you know, biblical languages, biblical scholarship, and all that, the nature, universe, and everything else. But how does that relate to you being an atheist exactly?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily it relates to it directly. It was a cool title I came up with, and I liked it.
Hmm.
I'm harmonic in the sense that I've studied that stuff, and now I'm studying Pythagoreanism. It's just a fascinating part of. I'm one of those people that has my mental thought process in a million different piles. I'm studying everything from, poetry to music to science. I feel like I'm one of those guys that really wants to be a Renaissance man wannabe, at least. And
Right.
so I'm always studying everything, and I feel like I could pick a bazillion little, like something atheist, because I want to study everything. And it's just one that happened to mean a lot to me at that
Hmm.
time. But it's really important for me to make sure I do at least clarify that I'm not looking to be in harmony with Christians. I'm looking very much to be philosophically militant, and I'm very much trying to say that we need to be culture changers. And I've been talking a little bit more, this sort of tongue in cheek, but also kind of seriously, that I'd like to make a real strong effort in 8 to 12 years to be the first atheist president. I doubt that's going to happen, but I'm at least going to start some conversations that way. But I do think it's important that we really say, especially in light of what's going on these days, that we are in a culture war and we are the rebellion, as it were. We are the intellectual rebellion, the rational rebellion, and we need to be, making some strides. So if anyone does see my channel and they wonder what harmonic means, it definitely does not mean let's be in harmony with Christians. Having
I
said that, I
did
do
wonder
try to be
about that.
respectful. I do try to be
Yeah.
respectful in conversation, but on the biggest scale, we are in a culture war.
The good news is Christianity is declining, not just in America, but worldwide. I mean, this is a trend, except for Pentecostalism. That seemed to be the fastest growing sort of denomination, Christian denomination worldwide. But overall, I've studied this trend. So there is some good news here, Tim, and that is Christianity is declining. But then again, in America, maybe that's a bad thing because I think a lot of Christians, certainly on the Christian right, they see themselves as, okay, we are declining numerically. So we have one last gasp to get it right. Now that Trump's been elected president, we have this is a godsend, literally a godsend. And so we're going to make it right before our time slips away. Do you see that going on? You said we're in a culture war. Part of that must be what's going on in the States in terms of what the Christians have already accomplished and what they're trying to accomplish now in the next 4 years.
Yeah. I would say my 2 cents on that would be that yes, it does appear in some ways that it could be seen as like a last gasp, that cornered animal that knows it's about
Hmm.
to die, that's going to give it all it's got, even though it knows that leopard or cheetah is going to get it. Um, at the same time, I don't know that I would take it too lightly. I get a lot of people that kind of do give me those comments that have that sense of like, hey, it's not a big deal. Presidents change every 4 years. It's, your Democrats will have their day, yada yada. It's just it's not this isn't the biggest deal that you think it is. I kind of get what they're saying, and I kind of think it's possible that this won't be as big of an upheaval as we think or hope, or I should say fear, but as much as they hope. But I know enough to know that they've been working on this stealthily for a while, and I've kind of had my finger on the pulse of some things, both for just curiosity's sake, but also some personal reasons. I've got some connections that are very tied into some hyper Christian nationalist groups. And when I look at what they're doing, I don't know that we should take it too lightly. I do think that they mean business. And I do think that when you look at the fact that they're trying to take over and make things like the rule of law, but also the fact that they're heavily outbreeding atheists and skeptics. I
Hmm.
mean, you're talking about something where maybe right now the numbers look kind of good for secularism. I could see it swaying radically. I mean, if you have Christian families having 8, 10, 12 kids across the board and they're changing the rules and the laws, I don't know. I think in a generation or two, this could be a much darker country culturally.
It
So,
could be, yeah. You're going into the quiverful stuff and all that. That's
yeah,
that's their end game, isn't it? We will just have more children, the Duggars, 19 kids and counting, 20, 20, however many kids they had. We are just going to breed so many kids. We're going to raise them in a Christian environment, homeschooling preferably, Christian homeschooling environment, and they're ultimately going to be, arrows released from the hand of a warrior and all the rest of it, sent out into the world to conquer. And there's
yeah,
the dominion theology piece. So yeah, Project 2025, that's one of the things I've been tracking that since about July or August of 2024. And that's a scary one because, of course, back then we thought, well, Trump, maybe he won't win. But then he did win. He was distancing himself from Project 2025 toward the end because it was kind of a toxic thing. Now he's appointed half a dozen people from Heritage and, it's like, wait a minute, Trump lied to us. I'm shocked. I'm actually shocked that he lied to us again. So this is an agenda,
yeah.
and this is what's happening, isn't it? These people are serious, and they've been, like you said, they've been planning it, training people, putting policies in place. All they got to do is just enact the playbook on day one, and we'll see what happens come January 2025.
Yeah, and some of them, I mean, when I'm thinking of this, I'm thinking of pastors that I've heard, but some of these pastors and thought leaders in those Christian nationalist groups have been very clear Like when Roe v. Wade was overturned, they're like, we are just getting started. And I mean,
Oh yeah.
I think we are literally in danger of number one, seeing gay marriage overturned. And I think if they keep going down this road, they could even, try to put, I mean, I've heard of many pastors who've been preaching about gay people should be in prison or in some way penalized in this culture. I don't think it's going to happen quickly, but I think it's if we don't fight, it's like anything, you have to fight for it. Whether I mean, I'm not going to live long enough to know how the story is going to end, but you have to fight for it. And I think in light of the fact that we need to leave this planet better for our kids than we found it, and the fact that some of these things could end up being, a horrible part of our future. And it isn't like just because the United States seems so much like a dreamland, the land of the free and the home of the brave, and just this is such an amazing country and technology. It doesn't mean that Christians couldn't send us back to the Dark Ages. And I think that verse in Esther where Mordecai says, maybe you're here for such a time as this. I don't believe that there's any like you're meant to be here and there's a purpose for this, but I treat it that way. I'm like, really big doors swing on very small hinges, and I want to be that squeaky hinge that makes a difference. So
Mhm.
I'm hoping that we can knock this out of the park early on and just make it so that the damage is mitigated and we can get back to hopefully some good business in 4 years.
Exactly. That's the problem, isn't it? Is they're going after more progressive gains. As you say, overturning Roe versus Wade was just the beginning, the first shot across the bows. These people have been planning that. Because when I was an evangelical back in the day, my now ex, she worked for a crisis pregnancy center, and we were big into the pro-life movement, evangelical. We went on marches in Portland and Seattle and did all that, and dreaming of the day couldn't ever happen when Roe versus Wade would be overturned as evangelicals, and now it has been. And like you said, they're saying now this is just the start of this. We're going after trans rights, we're going after LGBTQ rights, gay marriage, and all the rest of it. We're going to roll all of that back. We're going to get rid of all that. The problem, I think, with Christian nationalism, it's fundamentally anti-democratic. You can see that with like you say, the Roe versus Wade. Majority of Americans did not want Roe versus Wade overturned, and yet they got it done. Fundamentally anti-democratic, and now they're working on the next thing. So yeah, this is what's going to happen. What do you think is going to happen in the Trump administration? Are you afraid? Are you worried? Are you you thinking, my God, I got to get out of this place?
Honestly, for me, I'm thinking number one, I will admit I try now that the election's decided, I'm trying my best just to stay focused on what I need to do. But
Hmm.
I will say I don't want to do anything that would look in any way like I'm fearful or afraid. I want to double my efforts and raise my voice louder than ever. If someone's going to go to prison for opposing Christianity, I want to be one of the first people in line. I'm not going to cower. I want my voice to be strong. I'm not afraid of speaking out for the truth. And the Christianity is killing our culture. Christianity is destroying our nation, and I'm very fearful about it. And I remember when I was a Christian, one of the guys that used to influence me a lot was a singer named Steve Camp. Do you know that name?
Oh yeah, I saw him in concert a few
Okay.
times.
Okay, yeah, I
Oh
did as
yeah.
well. But he had this line that was in a song. It wasn't his. He'd copied it from some older missionary. But it was basically something that said, in the context of what the missionary had originally written, it was like, oh, I see all these people wanting these cushy lives, and they just want to kind of sit back and, the white picket fence and all that. And he said, I want to run a mission a yard from the gates of hell.
I remember that song.
And I was so inspired by that. I was like, yes, we have to make a difference. And I would say on the other side of that fence, it's the same for me. I want to run a yard of mission from the gates of the hell of Christianity. I want
Right.
to take this sucker down. I mean, this is really they're really hurting our world. And I don't think people have any idea how bad this would be if they actually get what they want. So
Exactly.
my goal is to have a clearer voice, and between the Harmonic Atheist channel and which is honestly about to get a lot more aggressive in terms of my messaging, a lot more aggressive, and the First Atheist President and several other channels. I hope my voice personally is sort of ignoring Trump and just and what not ignoring him totally, but just in some ways saying we've got a job to do. We're on the culture change team, and that's my personal goal is just to get to business and stay at it 24/7, and hopefully make some really big waves that turn into tsunamis of our culture. And hopefully in 4 years, despite whatever damage he's definitely going to do, and he's going to do some of those things, I'm sure.
Oh
But
yeah.
hopefully we can overturn it, undo it, and get back to business and be like, wow, this was an experiment, and it went horribly. It blew up, and hopefully even some Christians will, as much as they wouldn't want to side with atheists, hopefully some of them will say, wow, like we didn't realize how bad this was getting. Like we're talking about burning books now, and we're talking about putting people in prison just because they have a differing opinion or a different sexuality. Like this is the Brave New World kind of stuff. This is 1984 kind of stuff. We don't, this isn't what we wanted. We wanted to feel like we could say Merry Christmas without being ashamed. This went way further than that.
Hmm.
And I really do hope that people look at a channel like mine, and not just that it gets the message out, but I hope it, like I want in some ways to be a bit of an inspiration. And I'm not sure if my channel's big enough to ever warrant that right now, but I hope the message gets out there and the channel does grow, or at least it's some messaging kind of makes some waves to say, we're done with cowering. We're done with the little mousy voices. Like we're going to stand up and say enough of this garbage. Christianity is a bullshit worldview and it's hurting children. It's abusive. And the idea that that Christ is king of this country, like no way. Like we're done with that. We're done with that world and we're not going back. And I think it's a really big part of my heart. I'm working on a presentation right now that it's been on my mind for a year or two, and I'm trying to push the envelope and get it over the finish line and get it done. But it's called Manifesto, appropriately. And I feel like we're at a spot where there's so many of us that are doing these YouTube channels, and a lot of us are focused, I think, on some very good stuff, such as mythology or healing from religious trauma, which is a big part of my channel, and other related things. But I think based on what I'm seeing in our culture, we really need to have at least some aspect of what we do that's much more aggressive and much more assertive, at least to say that we're not here to say, hey, our voice is just different than yours. We're here to say you are like violating our culture, you're violating our country, you're hyper abusive, you're hurting children, and we won't stand for it anymore. Like we're going to fight you. We are the rebellion. And I feel like I need to, it's in my heart to find some way to go, as it were, go out with a bang in terms of my voice in my life. I want my life to count. I want people to look back and say, he helped people escape Christianity. He helped people heal from religious trauma, but he also warned the alarm bells that this stuff, if we don't stop it, this will be dangerous. And also to say to people, like, there's a time to heal and there's a time to be careful because you might lose your job if you speak up too loudly. There's certain people I've interviewed people where they're like, can we just use my first name or can we use an anonymous name or something? I get it. There's certain careers where you just can't do it. But for those who can, I hope people will say, yeah, it's time to speak up. This isn't just like a atheist social club anymore. Like we're actually, if you want to change the culture, change the culture. And I hope we can find ways to do that.
It is serious, as you say, and I think that was a big shift for me because when I first got away from Christianity, became an ex-evangelical 10, 15 years ago, my view was, yes, I was angry about a lot of things, the waste of years, the waste of money going to Bible college and seminary. I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars and pounds I spent, and just I viewed it as a big waste of time. But now I've shifted. I think I'm more in alignment with you. I see Christianity as actually harmful and damaging. I used to think it's fairly benign, it's just one religion of many, blah blah blah. But I've seen the damage. I've done work on guys like Doug Wilson, John Piper, John MacArthur, so many people, pastors of megachurches, Mark Driscoll. The list is endless. Women that have been sexually abused by clergy and children, as you say, have been abused in homeschooling environments that have been protected by things like the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. That's a Christian organization, protects abusers, protects child abusers, Christian homeschoolers, and the list is endless. And you think, okay, this religion is actually damaging, religious trauma syndrome, rapture anxiety, and on and on and on. You think, okay, for a religion that purports to be about love and acceptance and forgiveness and a wonderful, loving God and all the rest of it, it does tremendous damage. And now it's time as you say, we need to warn people about that and help get people out. I view it more like a cultic environment in a lot of ways. What's your view on that? Do you think it's more like it's a damaging thing? Why is it so dangerous?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think I try to toe a bit of a fine line at times with progressive Christians because I know that some of them are also raising alarm bells, which is great. And in some ways, we need progressive Christians to be our compatriots in some of this battle. But yeah, at the end of the day, even if the whole country was by and large progressive Christians for like a generation, all it takes is one generation to go back to ultra fundamentalism, which I think the Bible kind of inherently inspires that message. All it takes is one generation to say, let's go back to our roots, go back to fundamentalism, and we're back to square one. Like this, and nobody really, as far as I know, really questions if Zeus and Thor are mythology anymore. I'm sure there's some fringe groups out there somewhere, but by and large, probably 99% of the culture does not think anything of those ancient religions and cults. And I feel like we need to figure out what it is that's keeping this religion alive in our world. Like, why does it not go the same way? And there's something about it that's just not a divine something, but just there's something about us that like we just can't get over it. And yeah, I think it is cultish. And one of the, honestly, if I can just focus on one particular part of it, to me, a big piece of this that I think Trumpism really saddens me about for our country and our world is the advancement of patriarchy. It's like
Hmm.
these guys are misogynistic and patriarchal on steroids. And the fact that that is going to be standardized and this whole men are in charge. I know there's going to be some women in his cabinet, I'm sure, and that's they're going to have ways in which they try to look balanced, both in terms of gender as well as races. But at the end of the day, a lot of this really smells to me like white supremacist patriarchal garbage. And
Hmm.
I think it's real. If it's not there, it's really close. And I think there's a lot of people that are going to be celebrating his administration who are on that, who are over that fence. They're already into the ultra patriarchal white supremacist mentality. They're running scared. They're kind of like an animal that's cornered. But I think there's a chance that they could take over in ways that could be. It could take a long time for our culture to recover from. And that's to me, that's also part of it. Is I feel like we made some really good strides for a while. It's like I don't want to lose that momentum, but yeah, I do to answer your question. I do think Christianity is a cult. Any version of it is a cult, and just the fact that so many people are in it and don't really know where it came from, that alone is a big deal to me. Like the fact that people get tricked into it as children and have no idea where the mythology came from. From our conversation, that's a big part of my heart and my channel. But I mean, there's more that I want to do. I don't just, I'm not looking to become very super political in one sense. My main bread and butter is always going to be interviewing people for their deconversion stories. And I'm heavily moving toward some very aggressive and assertive monologues that are going to, expose Christianity more and more, not in a gentle sense either. I'm very excited about some of that stuff that's coming. And I hope it does ruffle feathers, but I also hope people are like, huh, that's a pretty intense way of saying it, Tim, but you know what? That's actually accurate. Maybe we've been kind of tiptoeing around the truth too long. Maybe we need to just say like it is. Like what is this religion? What is this cult? And I think for me, just a quick example that I like to use is a lot of people kind of get on me for making too much of the idea of circumcision. And I'm like, circumcision is one of the most horrific things that we as a culture have ever come up with. The
Hmm.
idea of mutilating a child's genitals. And I'm like, that should have been enough to deconvert me. Like, it is an idiotic thing to say, a God makes boys and 8 days later he wants you to mutilate their genitals. But some people will say, well, that's pretty small pickings in terms of reasons to deconvert. I'm like, yeah, agreed in some ways, but in other ways, it's like it's pretty horrific that we would even like what is it about our mentality that can't see the psychopathic and just frankly bizarre nature of the Yahweh character and the Jesus and the Eucharist and all that? Why can't we see the bizarreness of it, if not the psychopathic abusiveness of it? What is it about this religion that tells us that basically equates abuse and horror with love?
Hmm.
And this is really like a Stockholm syndrome scenario that's taken over the whole damn planet. Like we're all in love with our captor. We're all in love with a psychopathic literary character. Like, what is it that's doing this to us? And why aren't like I want to I feel like there's this groundswell in my heart that says we're better than this. We're better than this. Like culturally, we are better than what we have become. And at least to say, if we're not going to be better than that in our generation, can't we try to give the next generation a better shot? Can't we at least try? And obviously that's my goal. Not sure how much my waves will make a difference in the long run, but I'm going to try.
As you say, maybe it'll become a tsunami. A little pebble tossed in the river can become, something further downstream.
Yeah, the
It's true.
butterfly
I mean,
effect.
yeah, the butterfly effect. I was thinking about that. What you were saying is something that Dr. Marlene Winnell said. She said that for most evangelicals, their relationship with the God of the Bible, the God of Christianity, is more akin to that of an abusive partner. The abuser beats his or her partner, inflicts emotional damage and suffering and everything, and yet return asks for them to love him or her in return. And that's basically the God of the Bible. As I began to see it when I was deconstructing, I thought in good conscience, I can no longer serve, love, worship, obey that God, that deity who inflicts terrible suffering on people who just want to love him and serve him and obey him and worship him. Like Job is the classic story. What the hell? In the scripture, Job did nothing wrong and in fact went out of his way to ensure that he didn't do anything wrong. He was even offering sacrifices for his children just in case they might have slipped up somewhere. And yet, according to the narrative, God has this conversation with Satan, the devil, A cosmic bet is waged and they destroy Job's life. God allows Satan to destroy Job's life, inflict horrific suffering. All of his children are killed, loses everything. What is Job going to do? And he never finds out that the whole thing was a cosmic bet. You know, at least in the movie Trading Places, Eddie Murphy found out that it was a bet over $1 to ruin Dan Aykroyd's life. Job never found out. And that's the God of the Bible. The same kind of God that demands, so why wouldn't he create boys without a foreskin? If he's that omniscient and that clever, and then demand them to be circumcised. It's a crazy concept. Why do it?
Yeah. If it had been real, I would say that Job would have had quite an interesting conversation with God. Like when he finally gets to heaven, like, God, what the hell? That was what this was
What was that
about?
about? All over $1 bet with Satan. Well, let's go back to the beginning. I know we kind of jumped ahead and started getting into Christian nationalism, Trumpism. We talked about when I was on your show, you were into ministry, you were a Christian. We've said it, we've referenced it as we've been saying, we were evangelicals. Were you raised in it? Let's go back to your backstory. How did you get in and how did you get out of the whole thing? How did it all go down?
Sure, sure, absolutely. And I would say for me, one of the biggest things that I would want to just, if people really want to kind of summarize my story in one sense, it was real and I was passionate and I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
You
People
were
often
all
talk
in.
about, I was all in. People talk about, religious trauma. I did have religious trauma in the sense that things happened to me that I was clapping for. I was applauding, yay, this is great. But it was actually traumatizing me and messing with me. I didn't know it until well after the fact. But at the time, I loved it. I grew up in a home where my parents were Christians, very much involved in church and ministry. My parents both went to a school called Dallas Theological Seminary.
Oh
It
yeah, I know it
just
well.
very, very close to sort of the independent fundamental Baptist kind of mentality, but although we went to some non-denominational kind of churches as well. But we always had Christian radio on. It was like, some families might have soft music. We had Christian radio. It was just a little teeny radio that was sitting on top of the fridge, and it was playing preachers all day, every day. And it would
Hmm.
be cranked up for breakfast time, and it would kind of be tuned down. But if you were just sitting in the kitchen or something getting a snack, you'd kind of hear it. You'd hear these preachers talking.
Hearing the word
And
of God
oh yeah,
24/7.
I mean, we're talking about the old time, like Oliver B. Green, the old time gospel hour kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That stuff got drilled into me, but that meant a lot to me. And then my dad was making us memorize huge chunks of scripture. I memorized thousands of verses just with him. Saturday morning, he'd be like, "You cannot go out and play until we've gone over 100 verses and you stay in word for word," for years. And then I'd learn more verses with Bible quizzing and so forth in high school. But when I was homeschooled, my mom said, "I'd like you to pick a preacher that you listen to voluntarily every morning. Just, find it when their time slot is and always show up for it." I listened to John MacArthur at 8 o'clock and Chuck Swindoll at 8:30 every day.
Yep.
And eventually I added to it, Alistair Begg was another one, David Jeremiah, and
Hmm.
there's someone else I'm forgetting. But guys like that, they meant the world to me, especially
Yep.
John MacArthur. He was my personal hero. I remember I literally one time had the option to go to a church. This was when I was like much older, when I was maybe a late teen. I had the option to go see him preach in real life. It was like an hour
Ooh.
away. And at the end of it, there was like a table where you could get him to sign a book or something. And I was there with I think my mom, and she's like, "Don't you want, like, you listen to him, you love him, don't you want to go over and shake his hand?" And I honestly was in awe. I was like, I can't, like, I literally just want to stay back 30 feet and just watch him. Like, he's my hero. I feel like I don't deserve to be talking to him.
We're
It was
not
that much
worthy.
reverence. Definitely not worthy.
Yeah.
It was a big deal. And
Oh yeah.
I listened to him for years. Some of his sermons, especially the one on, I was homeschooled at the time that he was coming out with his Lordship Salvation series and the Gospel According to Jesus. I listened to those CDs dozens of times, like that one series dozens of times. And of course, I got into other preachers that were really big in similar messaging, such as Dietrich Bonhoeffer, The Cost of Discipleship, who is that guy from 10th Press in Philadelphia. I forget his name, but that pastor that died young. But he had a book as well about discipleship. That if you're following Christ, number one, you need to understand that the call to discipleship is not to complacency. It's a call to literally follow Christ and transform the world. And also implicit in that is you can't transform the world unless he transforms you. And if
Hmm.
that's not the deepest desire of your heart, to be transformed by the renewing of your mind, to be in the Word, to be fighting sin, to be willing to say, "Here, my Lord, send me." If that's not what you want, you need to seriously question whether you're saved, because the Spirit doesn't just come in and say, "Hey, I'm here, but I don't care if you kind of still sin and kind of do your own thing and stay prideful. I'm here to kill yourself and take over and reformat you and just reshape you
Mm.
into the image of something glorious that I can use, a useful vessel." And that was my messaging. That was internalized voluntarily. I ate it up. And my biggest goal from the time I was young was to truly transform the world. When I was 8, being homeschooled and so forth, I heard the message of this missionary named Hudson Taylor, who was very active in transforming ancient China,
Yep.
and just loved his message in these big, big books, like 200 pages. I was reading these huge diaries of this guy, and I was like, that's it. That's it. That's what I want to do. And eventually I became much more convinced that I was supposed to be a pastor, following John MacArthur's footsteps, crazily enough. And I remember a message by John MacArthur where he said when he was first becoming a pastor, he had this prayer. He prayed to God and said, "God, if you're calling me to be a pastor, to be a leader of your church, one thing I pray is I don't want to be just another pastor. I want to be making waves in the world." And that messaging too just really struck with me. I just like I that's exactly. I want to be, again, running a missionary yard from the gates of hell. I don't want to be living in Laodicea. I want to be on fire. I want to, as it were, if I'm going to burn out, I want to burn out for God. I want to be spent for Christ. And if you're familiar with that book, Sheldon Van Auken, A Severe Mercy, like I just, that kind of mentality and some of the C.S. Lewis stuff, it got me. And when you read verses like in Isaiah 6, "Who will go for me?" I was like, "Lord, here am I, send me." I meant it. I meant it both in missions as an 8-year-old and eventually as a pastor. I did really think I was going to become a pastor. And I went to Bob Jones University for a year and then switched to a closer school called Lancaster Bible College in central Pennsylvania. Got a degree in pastoral ministry. Right up to the end, I thought I'm supposed to be a pastor, and I became really convicted because as we were going through the pastoral epistles in depth, they're talking about the qualifications for eldership are that you're an older man who has raised children. And I'm like, okay, so I get it. So you have this test of your little flock, and if you do well with your little flock, then we'll give you a big flock.
That's right.
Like,
You can't shepherd the church of God without
yeah.
shepherding your own family.
I'm like, I'm 20 years old. Like, I can't. I was like, I'm not qualified. And I was honestly in shock. I was like, all these 20-year-olds, some of them literally had churches lined up. They were going to be pastoring churches at age 21, 22. Some of them unmarried,
Just
big
kids,
churches,
really.
kids. They don't know anything, and they're going to be telling 60-year-olds how to live their lives. And I was like, I don't know how to perceive this in terms of God's will, but I'm not supposed to be a pastor. And in one of the classes, there was a girl whose parents had done missions in New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, and they had done such a good job that their work became sort of like the model for other missionaries. And there was a video that they made of it where this tribe, which had en masse turned to Christ, they were now this Christian tribe in the middle of the jungle. They were willing to kind of recreate it for the video team, and the video is called Itao, which means it is true. And they showed how this couple had been rejected by all these other mission organizations because they were too old. And they're like, "No, we want to go, even though we're in their 50s, we want to go." They go to New Guinea. They take a couple of years, learn the language and the culture, and then they began to chronologically teach the Old Testament, which is a big New Tribes motif. They were always like, "Yeah, Wycliffe Bible Translators just goes in and then they just talk about Jesus on day one." It's like, it doesn't work. You got to start with Genesis. So New Tribes, which is now called Ethnos 360, they go in and they teach the tribal people through the Old Testament so that they understand there's not a bunch of spirits. There's one God. All the other spirits are lower than him. There's one man God, and he demands perfection. He demands blood sacrifice. He demands a perfect sheep. And then when you get to the Gospels, they were able to put the pieces together and say, "Oh, this is the perfect Lamb of God." And en masse, they all started screaming, "Itao, Itao, it's true." And I mean to tell you, as a 20-year-old college student, lost to say, "Well, I thought I was going to be a pastor. What the hell do I do now?" I was like, "Oh my God, I'm supposed to do tribal missions and Bible translation." And I was just like, "That's it. I'll be a pastor in 20 years, but right now, missions, that's it." And I loved it. I was on fire for it. And I just knew that I knew that I knew that I knew that God had opened that door up. And I went to graduated from Bible college and eventually went to the New Tribes Mission School. And I got sidelined. I got sidelined by some medical issues and some other issues, which I'll, for the sake of time, keep those for a later date. But long story short, I got sidelined and I had to kind of go back to what you might call secular work, which is for a Christian that wants to turn the world upside down, is itself a bit of a deconstruction because you're like, God, everyone else around me wants the white picket fence life, and I'm willing to give up everything for you. Why? Why won't you let me do missions? You're begging people to go, and I'm begging to go and be spent for you, and you're making me go flip burgers, as it were. Why? And it was really a sort of a soul-searching time, and I didn't understand it, but I just kind of said, you know what? God's ways are higher than ours, and I sort of went back to the regular world. I was a cabinet maker, custom cabinet maker for a while. And then I did some work for two different brokerage firms, a big mutual fund company called Vanguard, and then another smaller brokerage firm called E-Trade. You probably know the E-Trade baby, the talking baby.
Hmm.
And then moved over to a telecom company. And that, but at that time frame, something else was happening. I eventually got married and I eventually started having children. And so I'm in this conundrum where I'm like, God, when are you going to open the doors up for me to get back to business and missions or pastorate or something? And as you do, you try to raise your kids to love the Lord, do Bible time, praise the Lord, hallelujah. We're a Christian family. We're raising soldiers for Jesus. And we were sitting around doing our Bible time with the kids, just spinning. I learned quickly that the kids don't want to sing the songs. They want to spin the songs.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm not trying to make this boring for you guys. So we would, sing, Jesus loves me and Jesus loves little children and this little light of mine, everything. And we would spin and dance. And we got to Joshua fought the battle of Jericho. And it was funny because I've actually got a brother named Josh who's named specifically for that song. They
Of
couldn't figure
course.
out when he was born, they couldn't figure out what name to give him. And the day he was born, my dad had to go out to get some food and come back to the hospital. On the way back, Christian radio was playing Joshua fought the battle of Jericho. It's like,
There it
sign from
is.
God.
It's a
His name is
sign from
Joshua.
God. Well, your name Timothy, so that's a good biblical name.
Yeah, honoring God. But that for the first time in my life ever, I mean, you could say there were other things that were making you kind of question, like, why, God? Why would you put this on my heart to go to missions and then shut it down? Like, why this? Why that? But my theology was growing deeper and deeper. I was working on a prayer book, on a Christian worldview book. I was not moving away from God. I was trying to say, in a sense, I wish I had some answers. I wish I could understand better. But at the end of the day, the answer is to not ask for the answers. The answer is to bow your knee before God and say, God, whether I get answers or not, I just want you.
Yeah, just submit more and
A
yeah,
bit
is a
more
lesson of
and
faith. That's the whole
praise
thing,
him.
isn't it? Everything
Exactly.
has to be everything has to happen for a reason to all these things you're describing. I remember as an evangelical, everything that came along. What are you trying to teach me, Lord? What's the lesson here? There's got to be an answer. There's got to be an explanation. We may not find out in this lifetime, like Job, he never found out. So we're always searching for what's the lesson here. God's doing a work in your life, and you're going to find out someday all the answers, all the platitudes.
Yeah. But in some ways, I would say my goal became very much to stop asking for the answers and to just start looking for that blind faith, to, the faith that just says, whether you ever answer my questions, whether you give and take away, blessed be the name of the Lord, even though he slay me, yet will I trust him. God, I don't want answers. I want you. And it almost became like an anti-answer mentality. Like, I don't want to know why. I just want to worship. Um, but anyway, long story short, the we're singing this song, and I began to think for the first time ever, I have a problem with this.
Yep,
And
there's where it began.
the problem was I was going to have to teach my kids the full story. Of course,
Exactly. It's
the
a
song is
horrific story.
the song is cutesy, but
Genocide.
the other
Yeah.
side of it, like the rest of the story, and it literally that one night started the ball rolling. And that's why I've said several times, like Jesus was my savior, and then my kids became my real savior. And eventually, obviously, you have to kind of save yourself. But that began a 3-year journey, which I would have said for 80% of it would never have landed in atheism. That would have still been an off the table option. And I was studying things such as the ancient mythology, the Greco-Roman mystery cults, some of the stuff with Dennis MacDonald's work with the Homeric epics being woven into the Gospels, a lot of work on Enoch. All of it could have probably deconverted me earlier, but it was a 3-year process, and I just kept on thinking, I'm missing something. Like, and it was funny because the missing something was never, well, you could be that your God's not real. That was not part of my, like, where you're going to land here.
Yeah, don't go
It's like,
there.
don't go. Well, it wasn't even like I was thinking, don't go there. I was just like, my mind, it was not an option. It wasn't on the table.
Hmm.
And somehow, some way, slowly, step by step, I described as like if your worldview structure is a set of dominoes stacked up. For those 3 years, the dominoes were a mile away. And little did I know, I was taking micro steps and I could have kicked as hard as I wanted to for those 3 years. I wasn't close enough. And somehow I took those little millimeter steps and something happened. And I remember watching a conversation on YouTube with Ricky Gervais and Richard Dawkins, where they're talking about the Bible. And Richard Dawkins asks something very generic, like, what do you think about the Bible? And before Ricky Gervais gets really into the depth of it, he's like, well, it's obviously just a human book. And that wasn't really where he was going with a bigger answer. But as soon as he said that, it was like I probably paused it in real life or paused it in my head. It's like, it's just a human book. I mean to tell you, it was like shockwaves, like, it's just a human book. And again, those 3 years, just sort of like if someone near you is slowly sick and dying, when it finally happens, you're really sad, but you were kind of grieving for those 3 years. So I was grieving the death of Christianity for 3 years without knowing it. And something happened. It was a Saturday morning, the end of September 2019, sitting at my computer, and I just started saying to myself, I don't know how to put this together. Like, what is the answer? And it was like a voice inside me spoke. And it was like the other side of my personality as it were coming out. And literally it was like a drum beat, like that jungle drum beat that gets louder and louder, like they're gonna get you. And the voice was saying, say the words, say it, say it. And the words that I was trying to say was, it's not real. And my immediate thought, I kind of whispered it at first to myself. My immediate thought was, there is no way, there is no way that that many people have been deceived en masse for thousands of years. That's too much. There's no way that
Billions
we
of
got
people.
smart people, brilliant people. There's no
Yeah.
way.
Somebody would have figured it out by now.
Somebody.
Surely. You're not the smartest,
Yeah,
person in the room, Tim. Come on.
exactly. There's just no way. And I immediately thought, well, we think the Hindus are all mistaken. There's millions of them. We think the Buddhists are all mistaken. The Muslims are all mistaken. And all these other groups, we even think other versions of Christianity, like the Catholics, are all mistaken. They're all going to hell. Like, why couldn't my particular religion be wrong? Why couldn't we en masse, millions of us, be wrong? And that crumbled. And I was like, is that even possible? And it was just like the voice just kept getting louder. Say it. Say the words, Tim. Say it. Say it. It's almost like I wasn't like really a cursor back then. I was like, fucking say the words, Tim. Say it. It's not real. And I mean to tell you, the minute that I didn't audibly say it, but the minute I said it in my head for real, I truly shouted it in my head. That was it.
You were
I was
done.
like, that makes more sense of all these questions and the cognitive dissonance, all the issues, all the how does this work and my experience this, and why does, both the personal pains and the church hurts, the issues with trying to interpret the scriptures, all these denominations, the mythology, the bizarre stuff with the Homeric epics, Enoch. It was just all these little circles, and it was like trying to figure out how do they fit, how do they fit, and suddenly like it came down to one simple answer: your God's not real. That's how it fits. This is all man-made.
Yeah.
And as soon as it hit, within that hour, I was I was fully, almost immediately deconverted. I mean, it's probably took a good hour to be like, what the hell just happened to me? But it probably was just a few minutes at the beginning of that hour, but happened and I was out. And I almost began, number one, the ramifications hit quick, like, oh my God, maybe the earth is billions of years old. Maybe we
Not
evolved
six
from,
to 10,000 years old.
I mean, I was a young earther
Oh
all the
yeah,
way.
so was I.
And maybe we did evolve from primates. It's like, I I guess that stuff is now on the table. Like that makes more sense.
It's
Because
all on the table.
if Yahweh's not on the table, then that stuff might be back on the table really quick.
Yeah.
And but the biggest thing that hit me personally, like on an emotional level, psychological level, was the shockwave of thinking you could have easily gone to your deathbed thinking this was real. And I know a lot of Christians who deconvert say, oh, this was so painful and it was depressing. And yes, it's depressing, no doubt about it. And I'll talk about that in a second. But for me at that moment, I felt like I won the lottery. I was
Mm.
like, I cannot believe that I got suckered into this stuff for 43 years. Like, how in the world? I lost 43 years of my life to this stuff. And to think, but but you made it. It took you a long
Yeah, you
time. Yeah, you're
still
not the
got out.
fastest. Yeah, I got out. I mean, it's better than nothing.
You're lucky there.
You could have gotten out when you were 80 years old as
Yeah,
well.
on
Like
your
you
deathbed.
you got out. Like this still something. You got something to celebrate.
You got a lot of
And
years left ahead of you.
hopefully, we'll
You
see.
can make a difference, as you say.
Yeah, make a difference. But that was my biggest part of it. And to get to the depression part of it, and I'll pass the ball back to you after this. I would say that the only thing that really hurt me, besides realizing that this guy wasn't real, I mean, that's a shock to your system. Like, I've been praying to nobody. He's not there. There's no plan for my life. That's a shock.
They
But
talking
the
in your
biggest,
head.
talking in my head, but the biggest thing to me was heaven. And I don't, I kind of understand, but I don't kind of understand the people that kind of say, I didn't really want to go, or I didn't feel like it was going to be forever. Like forever was too much. Forever was not enough. Like forever would have never been enough. And I understand the idea. Well, you don't know what trillions upon trillions, trillion times a trillion looks like. I understand enough to know that the God who created this universe and who created time, if he had been real, he could have made time such that a trillion years felt like the blink of an eye, and like everything got better and better and better. And like if you just imagine the idea of like this is the God who came up with the idea of orgasms. You think if he came up with that on this, mundane low level, just think of the pleasures, and even says there's pleasures at his right hand forevermore. Like what does it look like when God says, I'm going to make you thrive in ways that will literally make you dance and laugh, and you will just be continually shocked at what beauty I can bring. Like, remember that movie Contact with Jodie Foster,
Hmm.
where she's, she wants to go on the trip, and then she gets kicked off, and then there's the issue, but then she ends up going at the end, and the ball takes her through the wormhole, and she kind of is like going through the different galaxies and stuff, and right before the scene where they actually descend her down to the planet, she's first like just at a glancing view of the entire galaxy that she's about to go down into. And she just the ball is just kind of hovering in space, and she can see through the front of it. And she's just staring at this whole galaxy that's just it's just hers, as it were, her galaxy right there, beautiful as can be. And she's like, there are no words. You should have sent a poet. And she's just like almost shaking and crying to see the beauty of this, and to think, if my God created the universe, and we don't know the half of what's out there, we don't even know what's invisible that we can't even see yet, that might be right next door to us. The stuff that's out there, you don't think he has the ability to make you happy? The inventor of happiness doesn't have the ability to make you happy. Um, their vision, people that say that to me, their vision was too small. My vision of God was beyond, beyond. I believe that his glory was such that I would absolutely be enraptured simply to be at his feet. People say I wouldn't have wanted to worship him that long. I believed I was a sinner bound for hell, and that he saved me. Eternity is not enough to say thank you for that. I meant this, and it's still, honestly, it still fucking hurts. I wanted to live forever, and I still do, and I hate that I lost it. I have no delusions of grandeur that I'm going to get it. I know that my time is my time, and when my time's up, that's it. But it hurts, and I wanted to live forever. That was one of probably the biggest, besides obviously just God himself. Obviously the biggest thing is I wanted God, and I thought I had him. I thought he was my father, and I thought I'd see him face to face, and he would transform me. But the idea that you not only don't have a father, you don't have a home. You are essentially an orphan in this universe, and you are homeless in this universe compared to what you thought you had. That shook me to the core, and it still at times depresses me. And I am an atheist, I'm a materialist, I'm a nihilist, but I can't live there because it hurts too much. But my goal is to try to both admit the reality of what I think there's no evidence for anything beyond this, but also to say you have to live as if life is so beautiful, so poetic, as if there's a reason to fight every day, make it more beautiful for the future generation. And that's where I'm at. That's what my channel in a nutshell is about, is trying to help free minds and to help make life beautiful, and fight the darkness, and leave it better than we found it. So that's me in a very nutshell. I've left out a lot of stuff, but that's the general track.
I can definitely resonate with so much of what you're saying. The upbringing, listening to Christian preachers. I mean, I talk about this in my book. When I was working at a battery warehouse in Seattle, I was a fired up evangelical. I'd gotten saved, in 1989 at a church service and all this. And I used to listen to those same radio preachers all day, every day in my truck. And I viewed it as a godsend, like you did probably as a kid, listening to J. Vernon McGee, David Hawking, John MacArthur,
Yes.
all these great preachers, David Jeremiah. And I would listen to them religiously all day long. I knew what time it was. I didn't have a clock with me. I didn't need one because I could tell at 11 o'clock so and so comes on, 11:30 so and so, at 12 o'clock. I knew what time it was by which preacher was on the radio at that particular day because they played the same people every single day at the same time slot. So I viewed it as like a free Bible college. You're listening to all these great preachers. I'm learning all this stuff about the Bible and theology, and it's like going to Bible college for free. So yeah, and then you regret. I so resonate with what you said. It pisses me off. All the decades that you and I spent, all the money we spent going to Bible college and doing all these things for God, supposedly the God that we've said we obeyed and served and worshiped and loved and spent decades, dedicated our whole lives to it. For what? I've got nothing left. I mean, I've got a PhD, so what? It literally isn't worth the paper it's written on. My girlfriend says your degree in theology, it's a degree in nothing. It literally is. It's not
Yeah.
even like if I had a history, if I could teach history, I could do something actual with it. This, what can I do with it? I can't get a job at McDonald's flipping burgers with, with a PhD in religious
Well,
studies.
well, can
You
I
know?
can I make an argument for something you that it is good for? And it's funny. There's a verse that this is conversations make me think of in Romans that Romans 9 referring to election. It refers to an Older Testament passage, but it's the idea where God is saying, what is wood good for if you can't use it? Like talks about a vine. Says
Hmm.
if the vine doesn't produce grapes, what's it good for? You can't make wine out of it because it doesn't produce grapes. And you can't make a board out of it. You can't turn it into furniture. It's just a vine. And the answer is, well, it is good for something. You can burn it in the fire and make the glory of God burn brighter. That's anyway.
Yes.
That's not where I'm going. It's just made me think of it for a second. But this is what I do think is the takeaway for me, because I would echo that too. Is we are on the inside track where we know how to undo the damage. Number one, we can talk to Christians who are on fire, who think it's real, and they're not casual Christians. They really, really believe this is all real. And they're going to look at Christians who are on the fence, who are Christmas and Easter Christians, and they're going to say, I don't need to listen to you. Your faith wasn't real. I'm not even sure if you really should say you deconverted. You don't want to turn the world upside down for Christ. You don't want to fight sin. You just wanted to have your cake and eat it too. Jesus was fire insurance to you. And like for people like us, that can't be said. And the other thing is, so I say at first, like we could get the Christian's audience a little bit more because we talk the lingo and we mean it with our ancient testimony from our old lives. But in addition, I think just the fact that we know how the sausage is made, we know how to put the clock together, so we know how to take it apart and put it back together over and over. We've done it enough that we can look at the nitty gritty of theology as well as the big picture of how the indoctrination works and just the church system, the religious system, how this is really an oppressive system of abuse, and it's a manipulation machine, it's a propaganda machine. We have been in it. We didn't know what we were in at the time, but we were in it enough that now that we're out of it, we can look back at it and say, I know what it was, and I know how to do it successfully. I mean, you and I could probably theoretically go into a church and trick people, and we could do all the lingo and pray, whatever.
Oh
We could
yeah, preach
become
a
even
sermon, do everything.
everything,
Yep,
and they wouldn't know the difference. They would
exactly.
not know it because we were that deep. And I think when you're that deep, that you are, you could be, you could literally go back into a church and stealthily become a church leader again, if you needed to. Someone at that level, to me, is very philosophically dangerous. That you're like the dynamite in the room because you can unpack this, and I feel like that's in many ways the clever, awesome role that we're in is to say, wow, we lost so much time, but we would not be so dangerous to the Christian religion if we hadn't been in it for so long and so deep in it, Does that
Yeah, exactly.
make
I was going to
sense?
say, you must have heard that charge. You referenced that. Tim, you were never a Christian to begin with. And I talk about that in my book, one of the last chapters. Okay, those of you who say that I was never a Christian, let's just roll out the pedigree. Let's roll out the decades, not just years, decades of faithful service to God and the church. And like you said, you went through all that stuff. Has anyone said that to you, Tim? You were never a Christian. That's your problem. You were a faker. And now, I don't know what you are now, but you were never a Christian to begin with. your story gives a lie to that statement. You were an absolute 100% dyed in the wool, all in Christian.
I've had I guess the whole gamut. I've had one person who I, I guess my testimony shook them up. I don't think it's someone that I've had a personal conversation with, but it was like a comment that they put where they're like, I would have said that about everybody, that you can't be a real Christian and leave, but they're like, I heard you talking and share your story. You could tell from the comment it shook them. I was like, you really sound like you're a real Christian. So I'm glad it shook them up a little bit that there's more than just the casual Christians that they might see on these channels, if that's their perception and that's their objection as to why we're, all not truly deconverted people. But I do get that generic comment from people that don't really listen to me. They just kind of add it probably to every video that comes out on a channel like mine. But I think that being that we're from it, we understand that there is just by definition that perception that you can't truly not just know the Bible and know the theology, but you can't experience God and then unexperience him. It'd be like someone who gets married and you have the beauty of the romance and you have the beauty of the wedding day and you have the beauty of your intimate life and your children, your family, you're doing life together, and then someone says that person doesn't exist. Like, but I know they exist. I've had so many memories. I've, as it were, tasted and seen that my spouse is good. We've
Mm.
got memories and photos. Like, this is real. There is no way to say this person doesn't exist unless you're like in that beautiful mind mentality where you're making somebody up. But this is real. And I think that's what for a lot of them, they're thinking it isn't just an issue of the apologetics perspective of I can defend my faith. It's that I have experienced God. I have sensed his presence. I've seen him open doors. I know I've sensed his power. I couldn't, kind of like we would say, you can't unsee what you've seen when you deconvert. To them, like they can't unsee what they've seen in terms of the power of God. And even just maybe scripturally and philosophically, like to who else will we go? You alone have the words of life. Like if you don't believe in this, there's nothing left but atheistic secular darkness. Your life has no inherent meaning anymore, or does it? I'm like, correct. It has no inherent meaning. There's nothing transcendent about my life anymore. Like to us, that is complete darkness. I wouldn't want to live if Christ isn't real, which is one of the most horrific things that Christianity does, is it makes you literally think, I want to die if my mythological character from 2,000 years ago isn't alive. I just want to die.
Crazy statement. Yeah.
But yeah, I think when you look at it that way, that they feel like they've experienced God and that they intellectually think everything else is utter darkness. Yeah, to them, like there's no way you would purposefully truly choose beauty and light and life and glory and wonder and power and forgiveness and grace and connection and meaning and purpose and then voluntarily just give it up. You wouldn't. You couldn't taste something that good and wonderful and then say I don't care about it anymore. It'd be like I think again going back to the romantic metaphors, if you were like wanting so much to meet the love of your life and you kind of envision like I know that the kind of person that I would thrive with is this kind of personality and this, and you have some different romantic relationships that don't work out and you kind of that's definitely not the kind of romantic relationship I want, and you just kind of slowly formulate what would probably work really well for you, and you eventually almost can kind of, if you're not careful, and I say this because about myself as well, it's a temptation, but you can almost kind of romantically fantasize, like, I can't wait to meet the love of my life. Like, I just can't wait to meet that one person. And even though I don't believe in soulmates, you can kind of psychologically think as if, there's that one magic person out there for me. But like, you wouldn't dream about this person for your whole life and think, I can't wait to meet her. And then finally you meet her and you're like, I changed my mind. Like, no, you've been dreaming about this for 20 years, 30 years. Like, you finally met her. You're going to be like, I got to meet her. I got to talk to her. Like, how can you have that much vested in this and then just be like, oh, I don't care. I'm not going to say hello because of whatever. It's raining and I don't want to get rained on today. So I'm not going to go say hi to her. Like, you've been waiting for her for 30, 40 years. Go meet her. Go say hi. That's how much, it's like, you're not going to be that into God and then be like, I don't care. God, if God means everything to you, then he means everything to you. So I get it. And especially with Calvinism mixed in, which is to my another day, but that on steroids was part of my journey too. And, with Calvinism mixed in, yeah, if you've not only tasted and seen that the Lord is good, but he has chosen you from before time began, there's no way. You cannot,
You're
you
one
cannot
of the
undo that.
elect.
Yeah.
It's true. Well, we're running short on time, but I do have one more question for you. Actually, two. You talk a lot about, okay, your story. It's a very powerful one.
the disillusionment, the anger, the resentment. We wasted decades of our life. You could be very bitter and angry. How do you reconstruct on the back end? What's the best advice you have? Let's say someone's listening, they've walked away from their whatever religion, cult, belief system. They're pissed off, they're angry, they're upset, they're hurting. What are they doing now? What should that person do? What was the best thing you found to help sort of rebuild your authentic self after you walked away from it all?
Hmm. That's a tough question. It's a loaded question. I think we could probably go on that for a while and
Hmm.
start a whole conversation on that one. But in a nutshell, I would say, let me use an example. I think this example will help illustrate what I'm going to say. When I was looking for a wife, I dated a girl that I met through Harmony. I was here in Atlanta and she was down in Florida. And we dated for 12 months and then got engaged. And we went through premarital counseling here in Georgia. And and she would come up and visit and so forth. We're waiting for this wonderful day that's going to come where we're going to get married. And we're down to the 1 month before the wedding date. And she's here for another visit. I'm going back and forth between Fort Myers, Florida, and back and forth for her to hear. And we meet with the counsel here, former pastor, and he's just thrilled. He's like, "You guys seem like such a great fit." And she testifies, she's like, "I've never been treated better in my life. He just loves me to He's so good to me." And you're like, everything's going great. She goes home. A day or two later, I come home from work to an email saying everything is over. I won't explain it. We're done. Don't bother calling or emailing. No one, don't call my parents, anybody. We're done.
Cut you off.
Just cut me off. And, of course, the accusations fly. Like, what happened? What did you do? Was there a blow up? Were you secretly abusive? I was like, no, none of it. Like, we were just, everything was great. This was truly wonderful. And eventually somebody at my work, a real nice older guy that's been through life enough to kind of know, he's like, look, forget about what everyone else is saying. I can tell you what's happening, Tim. She's dating someone else, okay? That no one else is willing to say it to. She
That's
cut
what's
you
going
off
on.
because she's double dating. Like,
She
I'm
got another
sorry.
guy on the sly.
Another guy. And sure enough, the day she was going to marry me, she married him.
Wow.
After 18 months of dating and engagement.
Stringing you
But
along.
at that point, this is where I want to get to. At that point, you could say to yourself, "Oh my God, somebody else is screwing the girl I was about to have sex with." And I had kept her pure and everything. "Oh my God, someone took my wife, and I can't believe it." And you can go to such a dark, depressive place at that with those kind of
Oh yeah,
situations.
absolutely.
But at the same time, you have to say to yourself, this is a person who doesn't care if you are alive or dead right now.
Like you
They don't
dodged a
want to
bullet.
know. Yeah, like they don't, well, I just mean in the sense of, like, from their perspective, is there any reason to think that they care about you?
Mm.
And you're clinging to, like, maybe they'll wake up and realize how much love we've had for 18 months. Like, it's like, shut those thoughts down. They don't care if you're breathing right now. They don't care to know anything. They don't want to know what you're doing. Now, in a month, in 10 years, they don't want to know you. They have moved on to someone else. It is over. And at that point, with situations like that, you can choose to say to yourself, I'm going to mope and grope and I'm going to just stare at the wall. This is horrible. Where you can
Yeah.
get back to real life and say, there's people that care about me, love me. There's things I can do that are beautiful. And I'm not saying you shouldn't grieve, but to say, do you want to let the grief literally destroy
Yeah.
your
Just
life and
overwhelm
turn
you.
take like it's already it's a girl like that is already effectively wasted a lot of my time.
Yeah.
I would have been better off just never knowing her. She's wasted my time. It's like, do you want her to waste a little bit more or not? And I feel like that mentality really and that's some very wise, again, very older, mature people in my life that kind of talked me through that. Said, why would you let someone like that steal even more of your life? Grieve it a little bit and then get back on the horse,
Yeah.
get back to
Move
real
on.
life. And I feel like that's maybe, I don't know, hopefully it resonates with some people a little bit, but just say, this thing messed with us. It did its damage. It is what it is. It happened. It's over. It's really over. It's fully over. You can't go back if you want to. You can't get plugged back in the matrix. You wouldn't want to be plugged back in if you could. It's over. But the question is now, what do you do with it? And to me, the biggest answer is this is effectively one of the biggest life thefts, possible. It will steal your life. It'll steal your personality, your identity. Celebrate the fact that you've got some time left and make it beautiful and figure out what you like. Everything from, just figuring out what would brainstorm, what would I have been like without Christianity? And also find out the ways in which you're maybe messed up by Christianity or hindered. Maybe it's something as simple as, like, I've always been ashamed of my fantasy life or of masturbating. So dive into it, enjoy your fantasy life and start masturbating
Hmm.
and, figure out your sexuality stuff. But for sure, like, start, if nothing else, start to look at the world through fresh eyes. I mean, to me, it was one of the biggest, craziest feelings, as much as this is like so mundane, to walk outside on a clear night after deconversion. And I know I did this a couple times because I called Recovering from Religion, that group.
Oh yeah.
They have a hotline. And if anyone doesn't have someone to talk to, they're a great group to talk to. And they won't push you out of religion. They'll just listen. But I called them a couple times, and I wasn't ready to share my journey with my loved ones yet. So I would go out when the kids were asleep and so forth. They got 8, 9 o'clock at night and call myself into Recovering from Religion. And you're talking to somebody, but you're also staring up at the night sky. And for the first time, you're like, I've always associated this with Yahweh and Jesus and angels and demons in heaven. Like, that has nothing to do with any of this. It's not real. It's not relevant. It's fake. And just to start to try to grasp what the universe has been like without any of that stuff, and to slowly bring it down to your, little micro level of your life. But to try to just start with the whole cosmos and say, this is a universe without Yahweh. Put yourself in that big picture first, and then work your way down. And it has a way of making you feel humbled, and also to realize, yeah, my life is really small and it's really short. I'm not going to waste it grieving Christianity. I'm going to live my life because I do not have much time left. Even if I've got 40 years left, I do not have much time left. Make it count. Make your, seize the day. Carpe diem.
It's funny because so much of the language that you use is straight out of evangelicalism, isn't it? It's
It is.
ironic. It is baked into our DNA, though, isn't it?
It
Changing
is.
the culture, transforming the culture, making the best of the time you've got. These are all phrases I heard growing up at church. I used to preach these things, Tim.
Oh yeah.
It's ironic, but there's something there, isn't there? And I love the emotive aspect of what you said because I've talked to so many people, and it's true. They say, get educated, read books, read stuff on cult psychology, and go get a therapist. And you've done some of that, and those things can be very helpful. I've used all of those. But I love what you said about that. You can't just dwell on it. It will just eat you up. It'll tear you up, won't it? If you just sit there and you're pissed off and you can't stay in that phase. You can be angry and you need to work through that. I think you're right. You've got to work through those phases. But man, if you stay there, it's so hard to stay angry, for years and years and years. It just eats you up. It just tears you up. It's not healthy. You've got to find a way to process that and move past it and go, yeah, okay, that screwed me up bigly, as Trump would say. But what do I do now? I've got to make a difference. I've got to do something. I've got to be creative. I've got to be my authentic self, whatever that means. I need to figure that out and get busy about doing what that is. So, yeah, I think that's really good advice. Now, the second question I was going to ask you is how can people find you on social media? Your show is The Harmonic Atheist. How can people get a hold of you?
Sure. The best way, of course, is if you can, to subscribe there and like and subscribe and hit the bell. You'll see all the videos pop up. I'm doing more live streams soon. I was doing some for a while. My schedule's a little bit adjusted with some things with the family, but trying to get back to the live streams as heavily as I can. I've got a lot more monologues coming soon. So the main gist is to be watching me on YouTube, watching me, I should say, for some of the stuff, but watching the great guests like yourself that I have. But in terms of personally, if people want to reach me, I do have the Facebook page. It's like Harmonic Atheist, so the matching name. But the easiest way is just to reach out to me on my personal Facebook page. The handle is at Harmonic Tim. And so just look me up there at Harmonic Tim and reach out to me if you want to, like, for example, become a guest on the channel. The biggest people often ask me, like, how do you decide, who you're going to have on the channel? And I kind of have a personal little filter I go through, which is probably a little bit more, long drawn out conversation as to how I pick who I'm looking for. But at the same time, there are people that reach out to me and just tell me, like, look, I know you don't know who I am, but I've got a really similar story in some ways, but I've got some interesting nuances. I often say the biggest filter for me as to whether or not someone would be a good fit for my channel is, do you agree that Christianity is mythology, and do you agree that it's irrelevant to our lives?
Hmm.
And as long as people are fairly close to that, that's pretty much. I mean, I do have some exceptions I brought on the channel from time to time, but as long as people are pretty much close to that, I'd love to hear their story, and especially if they could coincide with some of the mentalities we talked about, where they were really on fire. Like, I know that there's a place to hear the stories of the casual Christians that went for Christmas and Easter. There's a place for that, but the bread and butter of my channel is the people that really believed it and really wanted to give their lives away for Christ and the gospel and the kingdom. And
Hmm.
those people Well, and it doesn't have to necessarily be the evangelical version. If you were on fire for the Mormon version of it, or the JW version of it, but you were really all in. It meant a lot. You understood the preachments, the theology. You were there when the church doors were open. If you could make it, you wanted to be there, not because it was your culture, you had to, but because you love Jesus Christ and you love his people, you love his church, his bride. If that was your bread and butter and you wanted to share it with the world if you could, and just bring as many people into the kingdom, man, if you would admit at this point it's mythology and it's irrelevant, it's dangerous, it's harmful, I would love to hear a story and put it on blast, especially for the people where they feel like they're safe. I know some people, it's just not time yet. It's if they go public, it's going to mess with their marriage or something. But for the people where they feel like they've got a safe place to share it, please reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Well, and the other thing is too, we are building a community, and that's another huge aspect of this recovery piece that we didn't mention. But in church, someone said to me once, the thing about church is that it works so well on the surface level, it's got a built-in community. All you got to do is walk in the door of any church in your area, and in theory, you should be welcomed and loved and be part of this community when you agree to their belief system and all the rest of it. When you get out of it, you lose that community. You're oftentimes shunned, kicked out. Like you say, you might lose your job, you might lose your family, you might lose relatives. But we are building a community of people on the other side, because I was going to say, off the back of your post on Facebook about our chat on your show, I got probably half a dozen friend requests from people who watched the video, followed you, and friended me. So now I've met people from all over the country, all over the world, that said, I want to get in touch with this guy, and here's my story. So, we are building a community. You need that. It's hugely important, is it, for the support aspect, because there's how many millions of people like us who have walked away from religion and cults and everything. They need support. So you're doing a good thing here, Tim. I think you definitely are.
Thank you. I'll just add to that. Number one, I love that, we do become sort of linchpins for some friendships that evolve from this, but also to say, for anyone that's sort of out far enough to kind of realize what's happened to them, they're not, it didn't just happen yesterday, but they've had some time to reflect on it and heal a little bit. They're ready to talk about it, maybe share their story. Just to say, your story really does matter. Find a way, number one, personally, if you can, write poetry or, song lyrics, something, write your story. It's, there's, it's like the Bible says, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. You've got a lot of things that you've been going through and healing from. Start talking about it. But, stories do matter. And one of the inspirations for me was that, was it the Humans of New York? Have you seen that page? It's a Facebook page. It might also be a website, but it's probably a YouTube channel now too. I don't know. But the way I came across it was a Facebook page, but it's called Humans of New York. And this guy would just go around to random people, and he would just see people sitting on their doorstep and say, hey, this is who I am. I do this. I ask people to tell their story, and then I kind of summarize it and write it up, and I'll put some of your quotes in it, and I'll take maybe 5 pictures of you, and I'll put it up. He'd show people that what he was doing, and they would be like, yeah, you're legit. I'll tell you my story, and you'd hear some of the most painful, gut-wrenching stories of this guy, and he's just walking around New York, as it were. It's called, again, Humans of New York. But that was an inspiration to me, because I feel like it's really hit me. Like, there's power in stories. And I love how somebody, I don't know who said this first, but somebody said that your story can become someone else's survival manual. And that really hit me when I heard that. And I thought, yeah, like,
it's great.
And I love too how there's different stories. Like, I'd love to people to say, oh, Tim, you're so inspirational. But like, there's certain people for whom my story isn't going to hit because we don't align. They don't, they're like, your world was so different from mine. But there's going to be certain people, certain stories that come on, like, that person is just like my story, and I really connect. And I love that, and your story, someone needs your particular story, because they're going to connect with you in a way that they won't connect with other people. So tell your story when you're ready. And yeah, it's so cool to be a part of it. It's really cool.
Again, evangelicalism. I mean, how many times did we say it? Your testimony. We want people to share their testimony. What has the Lord done for you this week, this month, this year? And
That's
now
right.
we're on the opposite side. So it's very interesting. The other thing I was going to say before I let you go, if you're interested, I would love to have you come back for our Dismantling Doctrine podcast Zoom call. We do these once a month. We're going to be starting them up in January 2025. So I'd love to have you back. If you've got a Sunday night available, I will hit you up with some dates. I think you'd love that, and people would love to meet you. So we can pursue that offline. But thank you so much, Tim. I've absolutely loved talking with you. Thank you for having me on your show, and I'm so glad that you were able to come on my show.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much. Great to be part of the community. Great to be working with you, and I look forward to someday maybe meeting you face to face, shaking your hand. But thank you so much. Great to spend time with you.